This is the Dalai Lama, the leader of Tibet. Well, the leader in exile. Now, Tibet's history in China is complicated. Let's not get too deep. In the 1950s, China got an agreement with the young Dalai Lama. Then they used this agreement to take control, including destroying the Tibetans' native places of worship and religious objects. They then began instituting new policies on the Tibetans. Tibetans revolted. Tens of thousands of Tibetans, including the Dalai Lama, fled to India. The revolt had failed. Now the Dalai Lama campaigns around the world, talking about a number of issues, but as you can imagine, a big issue for him is Tibet. Many ethnically Han Chinese are being sent to Tibet in large numbers with government-created infrastructure and incentives. China isn't just enforcing laws on them from a top-down dictatorship. If you start flooding Chinese into the area in large enough numbers, you can really put the squeeze on the Tibetan people, because the pressure is also coming from the Tibetans' neighbors who live around them. Chinese neighbors the Tibetans might not want, but now they're stuck with. And the Dalai Lama is going around the world and asking for help. He wants Tibet to be Tibetan again. He wants a Tibetan government not appointed by Chinese dictate. He might not be a fan of Tibetan language being almost entirely replaced with Mandarin Chinese in schools. He wants his people back. He views the land of Tibet as the rightful land of the Tibetans. In his mind, the Tibetan land is there to enrich and sustain the Tibetan people. It's there for the unborn Tibetan children and their future. It's not that he doesn't want the Chinese people there to have land. The Chinese people that flooded into Tibet, he doesn't hate them. He wants them to have their own land in the rest of China. The unborn Chinese children do have land somewhere else. He needs Tibet for his people. Now, he asks us for help that we're not giving him, and he knows part of the reason that we can't help him. I'll tell you that reason in a second, but what do you think of his request for help? Is that unreasonable? Do you think that it's okay that he wants the land of Tibet for his own people? Think about it. If Tibet becomes Chinese, Tibetans will only be able to live there as long as the Chinese don't decide that they dislike the Tibetans, because after all, the Chinese will be in control. If they ever get chased out, they'll have to try and find a new place that will allow them to live there. If the new place decides they want the Tibetans gone, then they'll have to find a new place again. A people without a land are destined to wander until they can find unsettled land to settle, or eventually be wiped out. Either intermixed away into the Chinese to the point where there are no more Tibetan people, or simply whittled away while wandering. The destiny of the Tibetan people may be annihilation. Now, why does the Dalai Lama know that we can't really help him? Here's a hint. He said to us, quote, "I think Europe belongs to the Europeans." He also told us about refugees. He said, quote, "Receive them, help them, educate them, but ultimately they should develop their own country," end quote. He's saying that the refugees need to return to their own lands. The reason we can't help them is because we don't believe our own lands should exist for our own people. We don't believe Sweden is a place for Swedish people, a place to sustain and grow future unborn Swedish children. We don't believe in the founding fathers of the United States when they said that they founded a country for white men of good character. Instead, we believe in people like Joe Biden, who stand up and talk about how wonderful it will be when white people are a minority, because after all, diversity is our strength. Or at least that's what we're told to believe. We believe it's a good thing when you walk around London and you can't find English people in their own capital city. If we don't believe our own children deserve the land of their people, if we don't believe that refugees that we help should return to their homeland so they can build it up and make it great, if those refugees have a claim to our lands before our unborn children even have a say in the matter, then ultimately we don't believe what the Dalai Lama believes. We'll have to turn him away and say, "Hey man, how could you say you want Tibet for the Tibetan people? That's kind of bigoted, isn't it? The future isn't Tibetan, it's all kinds of people. Those Han Chinese moving into Tibet are diversity, and diversity is your strength. Only by realizing it's not a crime to care about your people Only by believing that the land white people cultivated belonged to our children can we ever really understand anyone else achieving greatness in their lands. If you can't bring yourself to understand that your own people deserve their own land and their own future, how could you ever truly start to understand someone else's people and their need for a land and their need for a future that they themselves build? Things will get worse until you start to see the fact that other whites are your brothers and sisters. Until then, it's white racial suicide, and our children are the voiceless victims.